Hello, everyone. This is episode 47 of the Inventive Marketing Club. We're here every Friday morning so we can build a better marketing strategy. Joining us today are Claire. Hello, Claire.
Hello.
And we've got a guest, Catherine Every, who's going to be taking us through how to write good web copy. Say hello, Catherine.
Hello. Nice to be here.
Cool. It's nice. We've worked together for quite some time. In fact, we're working together on a current project, and it's really nice to work with you again on it because you're so good at not just the writing part of it, which is what you'd expect a copywriter to be good at, but just understanding all of the layout and the SEO elements, the need to drive action, all this sort of additional elements that I think a lot of our other copywriters forget. So actually, you're very, very nice to work with from my perspective. Thank you. Would you like to before you start, just introduce yourself, say what you do?
Yes, so I'm Catherine. I am the copywriter and director at Pippin Copywriting, which is the company that I founded in 2012. So it does mean that my business is going to be 10 years old on the 1st of June, which is more than slightly astonishing to me. But I write website copy and blogs and all kinds of marketing content for businesses of all shapes and sizes, from one-person consultancies all the way up to multinational corporations and organizations.
Yeah, and you've been very busy, very busy.
Yes, I've had a really busy couple of years, yeah.
So I appreciate you coming on today. And just before you start, I'll let everyone know I've had the day off yesterday, which never happens. So I feel a bit rough. I think we've got COVID in the household. Luckily, I can work from home, but I did drag myself from the depths of my bed to come and just sort of hand over to Catherine, and then I'll probably just sort of sit in the background listening, maybe writing a few questions for you once you finish. So I'm really, really looking forward to you sort of taking the reins for this morning. It's very helpful. Okay, well, over to you. If you start sharing your screen, we'll get cracking.
Fantastic. Has everybody got my screen up there?
Yes.
Lovely. So in which case I'll go back to the beginning. So to start the presentation, how to write good copy, good web copy. We've just been through the About Me slide. So apart of the things that I didn't mention is that I started my career in marketing. So before I came to copywriting, I kind of got a really good grounding in marketing and how it works and how we use words to drive action. So today, what we're going to cover, we're going to look at this, we're going to divide it into 3 parts. First of all, we're going to look at how to decide on the structure of your website. Then we're going to look at researching your keywords. And then in the final section, we're going to dive down into the nitty-gritty and look at how to actually write for the web and how it differs from writing for any other medium. Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, you need to start thinking about the structure of your website. So this is something that when I work with Ben, for example, we work on together. So it's a kind of collaborative process between the web developer, the designer, and with me, or the copywriter. So when you look at the structure of your website, this is the things that I would recommend that you go through. So the first question you need to ask yourself is what it is that you want your website to do. For example, when people come to your site, do you want them to buy something? Do you want them to get in touch with you? Do you want them to sign up for your newsletter? Do you want them to download an ebook? You can have more than one purpose, obviously. For example, you'd be very happy if somebody came to your site and decided to buy something, but if they were just kind of going through a research process, before they made the decision to buy from you, you might want them to sign up for your newsletter. So you can have multiple purposes, but probably one main purpose. So the next step, after you've worked out what it is that you want, is to start to think about what your visitors are going to want when they come to your website. So here's the way I recommend doing that. The first step is to put yourself in your customer's shoes. So if you've got a website already, you've got a bit of a head start on this because you can look at your Google Analytics and you can work out the most frequently looked at pages and how long people are spending on each page. So you can work out what are the really key pages. Then you want to get help from the real world. So you want to ask your customers what it is that they'd be looking for when they came to your website. You can ask them in informal conversations, you can run questionnaires and surveys, however it works for you. really get that insight, it's often helpful to find out that what you think people are going to want is not what they actually want. And ultimately, when you give them what they want, they're more likely to do what it is that you want them to do. Once you've got all that information, you want to look at the biggest trends that stood out to you. Work out what most people are looking for. Don't cater for the minority here, cater for the majority. What are most people looking for when they come to your website? Once you've done that, it's time to put those two sides together, what you want and what your customers want. Bear in mind, so what you're going to be doing here is starting to put together your sitemap, so the structure of your website. So you want to work out what pages are going to get the information you want to get across in the most successful way. At this point, bear in mind that not everything is going to need a separate page. For example, if you wanted people to sign up to your newsletter, rather than having a separate page that said sign up to my newsletter, you might want to make sure that there's a box on every page so that people can, as they're reading your site, they can think, actually, I would like to hear more from this person, and sign up for your newsletter. Similarly, if you're going to include testimonials, which I would very much recommend, rather than having a separate page of testimonials, think about how you can include those testimonials on each page, so there's no way that people can avoid them. They'll be coming across them as they browse through your site. Now you're going to organize these pages. So you're going to categorize them and put them in a logical order and name them compellingly. This is going to be your sitemap. So when I say put them in logical categories, think about what your customers will be looking for when they come to you. So divide them up into the order they're likely to be looking for information on you about. You might need to have categories and subcategories. That's absolutely fine. Google really likes content-rich websites. At the same time, do remember that people only really want a handful of things from your website, or a handful of themes for your website. So do try and group them together into categories rather than having them kind of loose all at one top level. Let me show you what happens when you do. So this is just another random website that I grabbed doing some surfing. And there's that enormous list on the left-hand side of everything that they do, which is great in one sense, but equally massively overwhelming, and you have no idea where you're supposed to be looking. Who knows what's going on there? So you're kind of wasting your visitors' time by making it hard for them to find out what it is that you do and what they can get from you. So once you've pulled your sitemap together, you need to start thinking in detail about each page. You can go into as much or as little detail as you like at this stage. Personally, I recommend going into quite a lot of detail. Start to think in detail about exactly what information you'll need to include on each page, how the elements will fit together. Because at this stage, you can start to think about how the design is going to come together around the content. It's also useful to think about how you can connect your different pages together. Shall I just going to admit, Chris? Yeah, so think about how these pages are going to connect together, because unlike a brochure where everything's kind of linear, in a website, it's almost thinking 3D. So you might, for example, if you're talking about when you're talking about your services or your products, if you've got case studies, it might be handy to link to your case studies from your products or services page so that people can kind of get a little bit more information and find out how they work in the real world. Then, once you've done that, technology problem. Once you've got your sitemap, you need to start thinking about your keywords. Just a quick recap. I know that you all know this, but keywords are the words and phrases that people are going to type into Google to find you. You need to make sure that these words are included in the content of your website. In the earlier days of the internet, there used to be hard and fast rules about how many times you should mention keywords in your copy, and basically the answer was as many times as possible. That's definitely not the case any longer. Natural language is where Google is at. So if something sounds forced and unnatural, when you read it out, because it's so stuffed with keywords, you've gone too far. So you need to kind of dial it back. If it sounds awkward, it is awkward and it won't help you. Also bear in mind that you're not going to need to include all your keywords on all of your pages. So it might be that if you've got 3 different categories of products, for example, you'll have a different set of keywords for each set of products. So let's just quickly run through the process that I would run through if I was looking at keywords for a website. Again, this is something that somebody like Ben, for example, would work with you on. So for me, the first step I would do is just a straightforward brainstorm. Brainstorm all of the words and phrases associated with your business and what you do. Again, it's really useful to ask your customers for their input as well. Again, they're often using different words and phrases from you. I do quite a lot of work for the window industry, for example, and in the industry, we talk about PVCU windows, but often, well, you know, people like you and me in our real lives, we talk about UPVC. So it's a very different, using jargon in the industry, but in the real world, we use something different. So worthwhile bearing in mind how different words and phrases are used. Then, once you've got an enormous list, it's time to start refining them. Essentially, you're asking, if I was my customer, would I type this into Google to find me? For me, there are 3 right answers here. There is yes, they would, no, they wouldn't, or only if it was combined with another word in the list. If it's yes, keep it on your list. If it's no, take it off the list. And if it needs to be combined, then combine it. Once you've completed this exercise, take another look at your keywords and see where you're at. If your list is still huge, you're either running a multinational business with thousands of products and services, in which case you're good to go, brilliant. If you're not, then I would recommend that you go back and kind of try and refine it down a bit more to those absolutely key words that you're going to need to get in there. 10 to 12 is absolutely more than enough. Next stage on this is to take those keywords and Google them. Enter each word or phrase into Google. Firstly, you're going to see if your competitors are there, because that will give you a good guide as to whether you've got the right keywords. If there are completely unrelated results in there, maybe take a look at that keyword and see, is it really necessary? Is it going to be confusing? Am I going to be trying to compete on something that people aren't actually searching for when they're trying to find a business like mine? Then we're going to try and extend the list again. So I use Google Keyword Planner for this, to just do that kind of belt and braces check. Have I missed any words that I should be including? So Google's Keyword Planner will give you lots of alternative suggestions for the keywords you're using. You can also use a site called Answer the Public, which I really like using. If you enter your search word in there, it will tell you the sorts of questions and other words that other people are searching on. I find it great for web content. I also find it really useful for blog content. So if you're pulling together a blogging strategy, putting in your keywords into Answer the Public, it will give you loads and loads of questions that people are asking about that subject. So it's a great resource for you for blog content. It is a paid for service now. It gives you a few free searches a day. And that's, you know, so you can kind of Google it use it over a period of days to research your keywords if you need to, but definitely a good resource to try. Remember, as I said before, it's all about quality, not quantity. If you've got really specific keywords that relate specifically to your business, you'll be competing against fewer people. So for example, if you sold balloons, if you tried to compete on the word balloons, not only will you be competing against every other balloon manufacturer in the world, you'll also be competing against hot air balloons or chimney balloons or any other sort of balloon. So you're making life harder for yourself. You want to make it as specific as you possibly can. Remember that you don't want everybody to buy. You don't want to bring everybody to your site. You only want to bring the people who are most likely to buy from you to your site. So there's kind of there's no benefit from trying to attract hundreds of thousands of visitors when only a very small percentage of those people are likely to buy from you. Better to think, actually, if I got 100 people and 10 of them wanted to buy from me, that's good enough. So the last stage is the nitty-gritty, writing for the web. So now you've got your sitemap, you've got given some thought about what each page is going to look like, and you've done your keyword research. Now, there are some specific guidelines when writing for the web. There's lots of sort of general good practice advice, but there are some specific web things that you need to be thinking about. The first thing when you're actually sitting down to write your website content is I like to do a little exercise I find really helpful to kind of understand the difference between web copy and kind of ordinary copy, as it were. If you visit the BBC News website and just pick any news story you like, go to the news story, read it out, read it online, and think about what it said and the way it said it. Then if you print out that news story and read it again, I think you'll find something really interesting. You'll find that when you were reading it online, it all made perfect sense. It all flowed from sentence to sentence. You really got what it was talking about really quickly. When you read it when it's on paper, the same thing applies, but it will feel very much more brief. It'll feel staccato. It'll feel short and sharp. And that's the difference between reading something on the screen and reading something on the page. So it's something to really bear in mind, is that kind of, when you're reading on screen, it is a lot harder. So you want to make life as easy as you can for people. So here's how you do that. The first thing to do is to make it skimmable. When you're reading a website, the chances are you're not really reading it word for word. You're skimming down through the content, trying to find the information you want on that page. So think about your readers, think about when you're visiting a website, make sure that your web copy is exactly the same, make sure it's skimmable. So think about what information needs to go where. Put the most important piece of information at the top, and then build the copy around that, and just include more and more detail as you go down, so that people don't have to read to the bottom of the page to find that absolutely key point that you wanted to make. Again, you can work with your web designer to make sure that you are structuring your website pages and the sitemap in that way. A really good, if you're interested in this subject, I'd really recommend a book called Content Design by Sarah Richards. She wrote the guidelines and led the project to completely revamp the government website and make sure that it was absolutely focused on what people were coming to the government website for, and trying to make it as easy as possible for them to get what they wanted fast and get the job done. It's a really interesting piece of work. Then the next thing about helping your readers is to think about that BBC News website again. So think about how you're going to break up your text when you write. So make sure that you're using subheadings, make sure you're using short sentences, make sure you're using short paragraphs. Even if that feels slightly unnatural to you, do break up that content into short, sharp paragraphs. Rather than having inline lists, if you've got lists of things, make sure you use bullet points, again, to kind of break up that text. I can show you what happens when you don't. You get something like that, again, just a random Googled page. There's that big wodge of text there, and you don't want to read that. You really don't. You'd have to be really committed to want to read that page. So frankly, you're probably not going to bother. There is also another reason to think about structuring your copy in this way and keeping your sentences short and using kind of simple sentence constructions. It's quite simply that 1 in 7 adults in England have got literacy levels at or below those expected of a 9 to 11-year-old, which is kind of quite scary. So that's potentially 1 in 7 of the visitors to your website will have the reading age of a 9 to 11-year-old. You don't want to alienate them with long sentences and complex constructions. New York Times, bear with me a second. Sorry, the American Press Association. If you've got a sentence of 8 words, the average reader will understand all of it. When your sentence is 14 words long, people get about 90% of it. If you've got a 43-word sentence, and let's face it, we've all written a sentence that's 43 words long and we think it sounds great. Unfortunately, people understand less than 10% of the words in their sentence, less than 10% of that sentence, which is kind of scary. And if you're trying to sell something to them, somebody, you don't want to be there. You want to be at 8 to 14 words. So it's really short, sharp, easy to understand. People are going to absolutely get it. I think at this point, it's very easy to say, actually, but my audience are really quite intelligent and they're going to get this. To that, I would say that even the average reading age of the average Financial Times reader is 14. So it's not as high as you think it might be. Also remember that people are just busy and they're time poor. Something that is easy to read is going to make their life easier. And nobody ever said, I wish this was harder to read. So if in doubt, make it easy to read. Then, while you're writing your content, and also when you've finished writing your content, you need to think about how you're going to include those keywords that you pulled together. You need to include them in your page headings. You need to include them in your subheadings. You need to use keywords in the text. You can also use questions so that when people are using Alexa or Siri and using voice search, you're asking the question that they're asking is in the text that you've written. Ben introduced me to a fantastic tool, and when we've just been working on a project together, that will help you refine your keyword usage. So you can enter the copy that you've written into this site, and it will rank it against your competitors' websites that say the same thing. So it can suggest ways that you can compete against them and get better results from your copy and get better SEO scores. I'm sure Ben will be able to talk a little bit about that when we finish that presentation, because I thought that was really, really great resource just to kind of check where you are on where you're using your keywords. Then I guess this is some more general advice. Whenever you're writing copy, web copy, whatever, I think it's really easy to get stage fright and think, goodness me, there could be thousands of people, potentially hundreds or thousands of people reading this copy. And it's a bit like getting stage fright. And it can make you feel a bit overwhelmed. And as a consequence, you get a bit uptight in your writing and you become very stiff and formal and basically nervous, because you can imagine all of these people that might be reading your website. My advice is to absolutely kind of cut down on that noise and remember that in each moment, you're having a conversation with one reader, with that one person that's reading your website at that time. So if you imagine you're having a conversation with them across a table or something like that, telling them about your business, it's going to make you a lot more relaxed. It's going to make you a lot more informal and a lot more kind of appealing to people. It will help you avoid the jargon, because if you imagine you're talking to a customer, you'll automatically kind of alter your language to make sure that they're kind of getting what it is that you're saying. And it helps you stay focused on exactly what it is that they're going to be interested in, rather than imagining that you're giving a speech to somebody. If you want to take this to the absolute nth degree, I really recommend pulling together an avatar. So I'm sure Ben will have talked to you about avatars in the past. It's a representation of your ideal customer. So who they are, what sort of age they are, what they're interested in, what their problems are that they'd be looking to solve when they're looking for a company like yours. There's a whole body of marketing literature written around the idea of building a customer avatar. And it's really helpful. It's a really helpful process. Once you've got your web copy together, or all of your pages together, it's time to start thinking about your keywords again and working out how you're going to attract them to your website. So this is essentially about how your pages are going to appear in Google search results. The answer here is your meta tags. The title meta tag is the bit that says rather inventive marketing support and training, and the description tag is the little text underneath. Google will build these automatically from the content that you've put together for each page. but it's a bit of a missed opportunity, in my opinion, because you can also write your own specific tags to make sure that you're selling the page in as well as you can. Because essentially, this is an advert that you want people to kind of see that and think, yes, that's the page I want to look at. So I really like this. I picked this example from Rather Inventive because I think it's great. So it's really clear. It tells you exactly what you're going to get by visiting that page, exactly what Rather Inventive does. There's even a nice call to action there, the call 0800 number. So people don't even have to visit the page if they don't want to. They can just pick up the phone, which is, ideal. Why, if they just wanted to pick up the phone and talk to you, you don't need them to visit your website. You just need them to pick up the phone. When you're writing them, you need to keep them short and sharp, so they'll appear all on the screen like that. So it's 50 to 60 characters for your title tag, and it's between 150 and 160 characters for your description tag. Lastly, it's time for the proofreading stage. So if you can, leave as much time as you can between writing and proofing. It is absolutely astonishing, your brain's ability to read what it is that you think you wrote rather than what you actually wrote. I have in the past left the word not out of a sentence, which is obviously quite disastrous. So yeah, leave as much time as you can between writing and proofing so that you'll spot what you actually wrote, not what you did write, because you can still remember that writing process and remembering what you wanted to write. You can also use the Microsoft Word read aloud facility where it will just read the copy back to you. It's really great for spotting missed words. It's also good for spotting really long sentences because you'll start to feel like it's going on forever and ever. So you can go in, step in and take action on that. You can also use a site called grammarly.com. Use it with care, but it is, again, really helpful for spotting strange spelling mistakes, words you've missed out. It'll suggest, if your sentences sound a bit convoluted, it'll suggest alternatives and say, here's how you can break this sentence up. You can get a colleague to read it and just check that the message that you wanted to get across is the message that you actually did get across. And then I would also recommend reading it once for structure to make sure that the big picture of each page is right, and then read it again for the detail, for the spelling and the grammar. It's really hard to do both at once. So just kind of do the first pass on structure and then do the second pass on the detail. So that's it, we're done. Those are the stages involved in writing web copy. So
lovely. Thanks, Catherine. Right, let me just stop the sharing here. I've got loads and loads of questions. So let me, all good questions, don't worry. Stop, thanks. Right. Thanks for using our example. Excuse me, frog in my throat. It's really nice to see our example. You were talking about writing copy. How do you go about doing that? You're saying about making it skimmable. Do you put together like a wireframe or skeleton? How do you think about that when you're just sort of dumping ideas down and working with the client?
Yeah, absolutely that. So what I would do is kind of, again, for each page, do a bit of a brainstorm. What's everything I could include on that page? And then again, winnow it down into the stuff that definitely has to appear on that page and stuff that could go on other pages, or if it was it's going to be mentioned on another page, then you can link out to that page rather than repeating yourself across multiple pages. And then it's about structuring it so that the key information is at the top and then less important information is at the bottom. Thinking about the headings you're going to read and how you can break up that text so that you've got, here's a section on information A, and then here's information B, and then here's information C. So you can, start to kind of break it down like that.
Yeah, and so make sure that rather than thinking about, well, I've got to write all of this copy, pull it all together, which can seem like an onerous task, is to actually just put down what you need. Just because it's much easier then, isn't it, to actually look across all the different pages. Do you have any tools for that? Do you use any, like, I remember back in the early days of web development, we used to use flow charting software and really build out these huge sitemaps. I don't do that now because it just seems like a waste of time doing all this stuff up front. But do you have any tools that sort of help visualize the copy?
I use in Word.
Yeah.
I mean, really,
Yeah,
there are those tools there, but equally scribble things down on bits of paper, use post-it notes, use bullet points in Word, whatever works for you. I think you're right. It helps to kind of break it down into manageable tasks. It's also really good for overcoming that. I've got a blank Word document in front of me. Oh, crikey, well, I've got to fill this. If you just shove some bullet points down, that blank page isn't blank any longer. And suddenly that first hurdle of, I've got to write an entire website, you've kind of taken that first step.
Well, on that note, so it might be that some people don't know they need a copywriter to begin with. And I would definitely advocate, unless you are good at writing and you love writing yourself, then you should engage someone who does, because it makes a difference and it shows. And actually you get what I think you're alluding to when people are not confident about writing and they're writing to the world. And so they start writing really formally, overly formally, and it's not how they'd naturally speak to their customers. And I think that's what copywriters are good at doing, because otherwise people will trend towards that. But what a question is...
Yeah, it's also the kind of outsider viewpoint as well. And so when you're in the thick of your business, it's really hard to take that step outside. If you call in an outside copywriter, they are an outsider automatically. So they've got that kind of outsider perspective.
Well, and you know what? And you do this very well, is you ask lots of questions, something that people might not ask internally. They just think they know it, and they might do, but generally having someone probe and ask questions often leads clients to go, oh, yeah, I didn't think about it that way. Yeah. Well, why should you? Why should you expect to do that?
Definitely. There's a great piece of kind of advice doing the rounds at the moment about as a copywriter, you get to act like the stupidest person in the room. So you can just keep asking questions and asking the most obvious questions to kind of really drill down into what it is that people mean, and that kind of shorthand that people in that company just assume that everybody knows, and not everybody necessarily will.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of built up expectations, isn't there? Well, on that note, I was going to ask if people wanted to work with a copywriter, what can they do are there any sort of guidelines that would really help get the best out of a copywriter, make sure that working relationship's going to work well? So
the brief is absolutely key. A copywriter will work through that brief with you and make sure that they've got all that information about your website and what it is that you want them to do. For me personally, I would say it's much better to overload your copywriter with information rather than don't give them enough. So I think you can tell the websites where nobody really told the copywriter anything.
Just go and write something. Just,
exactly.
Something like this. You're like, oh.
We've just got, could you just write a chunk of text to go in there? Yeah, but what?
Yeah, what are you trying to say? What are you trying to get across? Do you want me to? I can't just copy it from someone else's site. That's just not. Definitely. It's not going to work.
And it's best to take that kind of really honest approach. You're not trying to present necessarily your best face to your copywriter. You're trying to present your real face. Your copywriter will do the job of putting that best face out there, but be realistic. Tell them honestly what's going on in your business. Give them all the information you can. Copywriters are curious people, and they will be interested in what you've got to say. So share it.
On that note, do you? You can't know everything about everything. It's just, as clever as you are, Catherine, I know you are, but you can't. I know you're going to get some of that information from the client. Do you find that reading around the subjects as well? And so if you've got a new client, you just kind of read loads of blogs, books, listen to podcasts. Or how do you go about that sort of diving into their area?
Definitely. So as part of the brief, you would be asking them about who their competitors are and the industry magazines that they're reading. So you can go away and do that research and work out, get a real kind of snapshot of that industry and understand, what's going on and where your customer fits in that kind of system. It's interesting that almost as a copywriter, most of the work is involved in doing that research and reading and doing that kind of structuring, rather than the actual writing itself almost comes last. And I think if you get to writing a website and you're a little bit lost for words, you're not quite sure where to start, it's because you haven't done your research enough to know exactly what it is that you should be writing.
That makes perfect sense. And actually, I used to struggle sometimes when you're developing a website and there's some design element to it, you just get a little lost. Often we design around the content, so we want to make that more readable, but sometimes it just needs a little bit more than that. And the best thing you can do is go and look at other websites. Just go and spend time out there, not just other websites, but other media. Read books, look at things, watch TV. You get little ideas all the time. So you've got to immerse yourself in it, really. Oh, talking of that, here's the book you mentioned, Content Design. I have read it, and I like it because it is easy to read. It's not that thick, but often some people are daunted by books, but it's pretty quick to read.
And the type is huge as well.
Yeah, it's huge.
Not
and
even as big as that.
No, it's got good things in here, like this little heat map, which shows you, it talks about how people read a website, and it's got lots of technical information like that, which is really useful to understand how people actually work on websites, how visitors might come across. But as you say, that it's all sort of come from designing the government websites that she was part of. But loads of really useful information in there. Even if you're not going to write it and you're going to engage a copywriter, it's still really good to know and understand information architecture, because then you'll appreciate that actually you shouldn't, because a lot of people you're talking about actually, and I know you've mentioned this before on one of your blog posts about having a separate testimonials page. A lot of people will gravitate towards that. They will split up their website into discrete chunks, non-repetitive chunks. And we've come across this before, where they want an about page, a contact page, a testimonials page, and then maybe separate services pages, a nice hierarchy. So your services page, then separate services, then a home page. It's all very discrete. People don't like to repeat information. But for you and I, it's really about having all the information people need on that particular page that they're on without having to go elsewhere, unless they need to, unless there's more depth. So what you're saying about testimonials, absolutely. If they can go on the page where it's relevant, rather than expecting people to click on a separate link. But
it's that ultimate, people aren't interested in you, they're interested in what you can do for them. So
that's right. You're expecting them to click around your website. They'll go, oh, now I'm not on this website. I'm going to have a look at the menu and, oh, what option? Oh, yes, I want to look at testimony. It's not like that. They've landed on a page. They've stumbled across it from some tweet or some search. They have no idea who you are. They don't care about your logo. All they do is scroll, find the information they want. At some point, hopefully you engage them. There's a nice video and the writing's good, and they go, oh, that's interesting, that blog article, I'll click on that, have a look. Oh, that's good. And then, oh, another article, brilliant. And then they get wrapped up in it, and all of the subscriptions and other engagements that you can put into place will come into play. And on that note, the text app that you mentioned is called Text Optimizer with a Z, because it's American. I think I've shown it on other different webinars before, but it is very good. You just plug in your website, and it will then tell you other words within that topic that it believes your website's about. So that page, sorry, it'll give you loads of other words. It's so useful.
Yeah, and I've got Surfer SEO as well.
Oh, sorry, yeah, that's the other. Now, Chris, I don't know if there's a Chris on today. I don't know if that is the Chris, our SEO Chris, but he actually mentioned that one to me. So Surfer SEO is a mega tool on that. So Surfer SEO is not for the faint-hearted. It's more, so that's really good. It's a paid-for app, but what it does is it scans your website and compares it to competitors and says, they are doing this. These are the keywords you're using. You need to add in the keywords that they're using to bump up the list. Mm-hmm. But again, it does a similar sort of thing, but in a different way. And I like it because if you want that SEO edge, that's a really good tool for doing it. But yes, so Text Optimizer is free. At least there is a free version of it, and it gives you this list of keywords. And it also has a little side panel when you load it up, which tells you what it thinks your site is about. And that's really useful, because I've had some websites you plug it in and it comes up with a topic that's not relevant to what they're talking about. And you think, well, I need to add more copy. I need to talk more about that subject, because otherwise it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So yeah, SEO Surfer is the sort of more complicated one, but very good and paid for. And then Text Optimizer is a free one. So I'm dominating the questions here. Does anyone else have a question for Catherine?
Well, I wondered how you came to finding the right tone or voice for the text when you come to write the copy for a particular website.
It's for me, it's a lot about understanding how a company would talk to its customers when they're talking to them either on the phone or face to face, and trying to replicate that. So often when I'm talking to a client, I'm listening to how they speak and how they put themselves across. And then my job is to kind of replicate that in copy. There's a great toolbox called VoiceBox, which is a great, you run a workshop with companies and get them to define their own tone of voice, whether they want to be formal, so in some cases formal is absolutely where you want to be. If you're if you're going to be an accountant or a lawyer, then that's a perfectly reasonable tone of voice to have. But you might also want to be quirky, or you might want to be might want to be very informal, or it's a really interesting tool to kind of bring together those different ways of talking. You might also want to just be kind of provocative, and I think there's a voice called Firestarter where you're attempting to provoke people. So Brewdog's a great example of a tone of voice that's like that. It's absolutely in your face, and it's absolutely memorable for them. So if you're interested in tone of voice, I'd really recommend checking out Nick Parker. He's a really great tone of voice specialist.
Okay.
What, a bit of software or technique again?
It's VoiceBox. It's a set of cards, and you take it into a company and you run workshops, getting them to work out how it is that they want to sound.
You should investigate that, Claire. That could be quite interesting to look at. Yeah. What software do you write in?
Write in Word.
Just Word.
I know.
I try and avoid Word wherever possible, but I have to have it on my machine because people insist on still writing in it. So, no, I know it's got lots of tools though, and it's fairly standard, isn't it?
I think for me, in those early stages of writing copy, especially when you're sharing it with a client, it's just the easiest way to share copy because they can comment in it much more easily than if you can put it straight into the website. But it makes life harder for them to say, actually, that's just plain wrong. We can't say that, or how does this fit there, or could we change that to that? Word is just easy to do that. What it gains in the fact that you're absolutely focused on the text, and you don't go, oh, I'm not quite sure I like that image there. You don't sidetrack with that. On the other hand, it's sometimes quite hard to translate, saying, well, this is going to be one page of your website, this is going to be another page, even though it's all in the same document. So pros and cons, but yeah, it's Word for me. Yeah,
and some people get quite they think too much about how it looks to begin with, whereas it's much more important to think about what the content is, what you're actually what message you're trying to convey. It's interesting you're saying about the reading ages, and that the harder you make it to read, the lower the comprehend, or the less likely are people are going to read it all or comprehend it all. And at the end of the day, it's just communication. So our website shouldn't be, just because people who have maybe a higher reading skill are reading it, doesn't mean that we should write to that level, because it still makes it harder for them to read. Yeah. And it's like with good fiction. I find good fiction is easy to read, and you shouldn't ever be thinking about the words because it's just flowing straight into you. So you're just thinking about story. Sometimes it's nice to come across interesting words and different words, because they can, for those with an interesting mind, might go and look it up. But generally speaking, I think you should avoid that. Like you say, it should just flow without overthinking it. So absolutely, it's all about communication. There was one other question, if I can find it here. Oh, yes. You mentioned a couple of things about BBC News and why it's different printed out. That is interesting, isn't it? Why does it, because it's the same copy.
I know.
It feels short when it's printed.
Constantly astonishing to me that it should be like that. It is amazing how different it reads when it's on a bit of paper in front of you compared to on the screen. Yeah, it's a real insight into how web copy is different from, or good web copy is different from copy that you can get away with on a page and is perfectly acceptable on a page. So yeah, it's an interesting exercise.
Well, relatedly to that, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on line length. So the number of words on a line of copy on a website, because as websites have grown over the years, they've grown wider. And I often find that a lot of people are happy to allow copy to sort of stretch along the page, but it becomes quite difficult to read, I find. And it's difficult to find what the ideal line length is. It's quite varied, but I know you just know it when it just looks too long. And it's all to do with people read along the line, then they come back to the next line down and they have to find where they are, and it slows them down.
It's almost like your eye kind of wobbles a bit. The last time I looked it up, I think I saw that the optimum length was sort of 13 to 14 words. It's really very short.
Yeah, that's quite short, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's difficult because as websites get wider, and then you've got a little kind of bit of text kind of huddled in the middle of it nervously on the page, and it's an interesting design challenge. How do you use that width, but then not also have that content stretched across, so that it's really hard to keep your eye on that one line and then go back to the next line, which is way over the left hand side of the screen to start.
Yeah, exactly. And you can sometimes avoid it by using an image. Putting an image will break up the page, or columns sometimes. But columns, I find, I mean, they're used a lot in newspapers, columns, to help that same issue. But on websites, I use them sparingly, because it doesn't always work. It looks weird sometimes to have a lot of copy in columns. And
you don't know how big people's screens are to know that length of column is going to be fine, and then they'll know to kind of go up to the top, and they won't have to scroll up and down.
That's always the problem. Yeah, with a newspaper, they're just looking at the whole thing. If you're on a phone, I guess with a phone we could adapt it, but yes, it's all of these little challenges that actually, as our screens get bigger and have more capacity, we have more challenge, because it should just be about, can people read the information? Can we convey it to them? Okay, I think I've got all my questions there. But there was one thing you mentioned about the avatar, which is a really good thing to bring up, thinking about who you're speaking to. We do talk about that in, I think it's number 11 of the club sessions. We've got a session talking about understanding your customer. And there's one in, I don't think the avatar's mentioned, but again, understanding your customer, thinking about what do they need. We talk about in number 33. So IMC 11 and 33 will cover those two sections. Has anyone else got any final questions? Otherwise, I do have one more, which I will put to Catherine.
Go on, Ben.
Okay, right. So it's not a hard one, Catherine. Do you have any other tips? Any sort of quick win tips when you're actually writing copy that would be useful?
Don't be afraid of it. I mean, everybody, the truth, everybody can write. So you can write your own content. It is absolutely fine. Don't be scared of it. Equally, if you don't like doing it, if you haven't got the time to do it, if it's something you're always putting off, then engage a professional copywriter.
So that's a very good tip, that, if you do not enjoy writing copy, definitely ask someone who does, because it makes a difference.
If you're going to spend 6 weeks writing your web copy, what could you be doing that's a much better use of your time than fighting that and hating every minute of it?
No, totally agree. Well, thank you very much, Catherine. That's brilliant. If we've Claire, what have we got coming up next? We've actually got a week off, I think, for Easter.
Yes, no, we do. So next week there will be no webinar, and then we are moving into 2 people coming for website reviews, and then the following week we'll be having Heidi
Chamberlain-Jones. Yeah, she's great. And I've worked with Heidi. She's based in Hereford. Worked with Heidi for a long time on her website, and we do lots of webinars together. She's fun. I think that would be a really good one. So looking forward to that. Okay, well, I'm going to go and just sit quietly somewhere in the dark, wrap up warm. We've got the fire going downstairs, so I might sit in front of that. But thank you very much, Catherine. It's really good to see you, and I'll see you next week when we speak to the client.
Health permitting.
Yeah, I'm sure I should be fine by then, I hope. But I appreciate you coming on. Thank you, Claire, and thanks for everyone else coming on. We are here every Friday from 10 a.m. We cover everything from copywriting, strategy, social, SEO, video, and more. Lots of stuff. In fact, I want to do some productivity stuff. There's lots of things I'm learning about that recently. If you have something exciting to share, do email Claire, support@rather-inventive.com, and we'll be happy to sort of bring you on and you can share what you're doing. If you can't watch it live, you can always watch the recording later, or if you want to send a colleague or a friend, just share the Zoom link with them and let Claire know, so we can welcome them on when they come on. It's always good to have new people coming on. That's it. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all not next week, but the week after. Thanks all. Bye-bye.